the first thing I want to say is that we as moms, we need to have a reframe where we don't see independent play, even though it is a tool, right, that we are using to help us run our businesses or to get work done or whatever, or to even just get time for yourself, right?
Right.
So it is a tool in that way, but it's also like a gift, right? A gift that we give to our children. So if we can reframe in our minds that this is something we're doing to our kids, as opposed to something we're doing for our kids that also happens to benefit us, I think that helps relieve some of the guilt and some of the concern about, you know, how much is too much, or what am I doing to them, or how are they perceiving this, or, you know, any of those things that come up. The truth is our kids need independent playtime, time to be able to explore their own ideas and creativity, to problem solve in that way.
Hey, Mama. Welcome to the Working Moms Playbook, the go-to podcast for moms balancing careers and babies. I'm your host, Antonia DePace, former editor, current marketing maven, and mom of one. Each week, we're breaking down the systems, mindsets, and support every working mom needs to thrive, whether it be at work, at home, or everywhere in between. So let's get into it. Today's episode features Jill Lerman of Jillybean's NYC. She's a play and parenting coach, an early childhood educator, play expert, and, of course, a mom. Her mission is simple: to empower overwhelmed parents and caretakers to connect and engage with their children through simple and developmental play prompts and make parenting more joyful and manageable, which I think we all need. So welcome to the Working Moms Playbook, Jill. I'm so excited to have you on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I am a mom who works from home a lot. And I recently listened to your episode on the Learning to Moms podcast. I'm a big promoter of independent play, but of course also playing with my own child. And it's a really tough balance when you work from home.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't always have help or have my village, right? We have like a structure. So on those usual Mondays or usual Fridays, sometimes there's increments where John is doing independent play, but it's so easy to feel so guilty about it as a mom. And I did find on the Learning to Mom podcast, like your insights were so helpful for me in that respect. But I was also left with continued questions, right? Because I'm just like, how do I do this in a way that's not detrimental, I guess you could say? Like how much play, how much independent play is too much independent play? So I was really curious if you could talk more about the independent play tactics and how that can be implemented into a schedule as a working mom, especially when you're working from home and trying to do both at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, there's so much that I think goes into that question. I think the first thing that I want to say is I not only like support parents that are doing exactly what you described, but I also am a parent doing what you describe, right? I'm a mom who's juggling running my own business. And I'm also the primary caretaker for, I just had a second baby, so now for 2 kids. And it's complicated, but independent play is definitely like a lifeline for me personally. I think that there's a lot of different things I want to cover with this of kind of how you can go about it and how you can incorporate it. But I think the first thing I want to say is that we as moms, we need to have a reframe where we don't see independent play, even though it is a tool, right, that we are using to help us run our, you know, businesses or to get work done or whatever, or to even just get time for yourself, right?
Right.
So it is a tool in that way, but it's also like a gift, right? A gift that we give to our children. So if we can reframe in our minds that this is something we're doing to our kids, as opposed to something we're doing for our kids that also happens to benefit us. I think that helps relieve some of the guilt and some of the concern about, you know, how much is too much, or what am I doing to them, or how are they perceiving this, or, you know, any of those things that come up. So that's the first thing I want to say, because the truth is our kids need independent playtime, time to be able to explore their own ideas and creativity, to problem solve in that way. And the reality is that as adults, even with the best intentions, and I'm not here to say like, don't ever play with your kids, because of course It's fun, it's connecting, that's something, it's fun, it's silly, all those things. And also, when we're involved in our kids' play, we change it, right? We're not their equal, we're not their peer. We come into it with a different skill set. And so
Mhm.
when we're in it, we immediately change the shape of the play from the type of play that they're doing when they're playing on their own. So we're bringing in different ideas, we're bringing in different vocabulary. We don't always see the kinds of possibilities our kids see when they're playing with items. So sometimes, even
Mhm.
with the best intentions, we have a tendency to show them the quote right way to use things. We kind of, if they're struggling with figuring something out, have a tendency to come in and to fix. And this
Mhm.
then eliminates the opportunity for them to be able to do it on their own. So when we think about it like that we're actually giving them the chance to do all of those things, it really
Right.
helps us reframe our role in their play. And I like to tell parents that the best thing that we can do for our kids when it comes to their play is to see ourselves as a facilitator and not an entertainer, right? So that means
Yeah.
like we're not involved, but what our role is shifts. So I like to think when it comes to independent play, I love to encourage parents to use prompts, right? Or
Mhm.
maybe like invitations is another word that you may be familiar with, right? So this means we're maybe setting something out for a child that then lets them kind of take it from there. But what
Okay.
we're doing there is we're seeing like, hey, I noticed you're really into this. So I'm going to put out this thing that I think is going to be super engaging for you, super fun for you. So the care is there, the connection is there, the, hey, I thought of you, I see you is there. But what we're then doing from that point changes. Does that make sense?
It does, and it makes it feel like you're participating more and not
Yes.
just saying like, "Okay, I've gotta
Go,
go
go
do this,
play.
go do
Yes.
something."
Yes.
But it's
Yes.
at one point, it's probably more age appropriate, but when you're dealing with littles, they need
Yes.
that direction.
Yeah, and I think if I was gonna, if we want to get into kind of some of the tips of what this could look like, I think
Mhm.
an important reframe for parents is we often have this idea that independent play means our kids are like off in the other room doing their own thing for hours on end while we are doing our thing in the other space. And I think a key thing, especially if you have young kids, especially if this is something that's also new to them, right? That's an
Mhm.
important piece too. Most young children cannot get really into their independent play without the safety of a caregiver nearby. And that
Okay.
can mean within eyesight or within earshot or both, right?
Mhm.
So they want to feel secure and comfortable that you're there, which often means, look, some kids, and look, anyone listening to this with kids knows like every kid is unique.
Hmm.
Even within the
Yep.
same family, kids are so different. So there are some children that are just more natural at playing independently and don't need as much facilitation. So if you have one that's happy to go off in the playroom and do their thing, great, fantastic. But if you're one of the many parents that I work with that don't, then you want to think about, okay, well, where is play happening? And sometimes that means us getting creative about that. So that might mean, you getting creative about where you work. And can I set up an area near to where they're playing to get my work done? Or can I set my tray near to where I'm working? And that might look like if you have in a home office, let's say, if you're working from home, that
Mhm.
you have a couple of things on a low shelf in the corner of your office that they're allowed to play with a couple of feet from you while you're getting work done, right?
Right.
That might
Right.
mean setting yourself up in their bedroom or playroom to send a couple of emails and do stuff. And not everything we do, depending what your work is like, can happen in that way. But I think that we find when we reframe it that actually a lot of it can. And the same thing is true. So many parents I work with will say, I can't like get dinner done. Like I can't make dinner. My kid is, on me every second. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, great. So
Screaming
like
at your
how do
leg.
exactly. And it's like, okay, so then how do we then make that work? Can we set them up in a toddler tower doing something as we prepare so that they can see us and be doing their thing while we're doing our thing, right? Thinking about where play happens is often a key piece. And that often means reframing what independent play is. To me, anytime our child is engaging without our direct involvement and participation, that counts, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that might mean they're not off in a different space to be able to do that.
Right. And I think it's important too to know, like you said, it depends on the kid, like your firstborn or your secondborn, like they're gonna
Mm,
play in two totally different ways. But then I also feel like it's dependent on the day. John is so great at independent play sometimes, and he can just like, do his own thing for a good amount of time. But
yeah.
then there's other days where like, he is begging to climb up on my lap. He
Yes.
is begging to nurse. He is just begging for like any kind of ounce of attention and like cannot be sidetracked or
Yes.
cannot participate in any kind of independent play. And that can be really
Yeah.
hard as
It
a
is.
working parent. It can
It
be so
is.
hard.
It is. And what I would say to you and to anyone else who's experienced that is that we have to think about like the same way we have our days, that we have different moods and we have different, right? Like I didn't
Right.
sleep well last night. So now, X, Y, and Z. Or
Mhm.
my husband and I have been like ships passing. We haven't like had a moment and I just want to like have that time with it, whatever it is. Our kids feel this too. So
Yeah.
sometimes, look, there are times that like we can't figure out any rhyme or reason. It's just like one of those days, and that happens
Yeah.
too. But
Yeah.
more often than not, it's like there is something that factors in, and that means not every day is going to look the same. So, as difficult as that is, especially when you work from home and you have, maybe calls or deadlines or whatever it is, there are going to be those things that factor in that might make one day, what we normally have in place just isn't working today. So then what do we do? Now, sometimes we just have to fill that connection cup. And then that can kind of get us back on track. So that might look like, hey, for a little while, when at a time when you're normally doing your own thing, you are on my lap while I'm having this call or I'm trying to send
Yeah.
out this email or whatever it might be. Sometimes, I tell people like we want to think about the connection cup as an overall thing. So like if in the morning your child was doing a lot on their own while you had kind of a stacked morning, and then we had a little time together and now we're kind of expecting them to be back at it. There are some days where that's not going to do it. And then we have to kind of
Right.
figure out, okay, how do we then refill that cup more? That can come in the form of playing with our kid. That can come in the form of, hey, I'm going to put my phone, my computer aside, and for just these couple of minutes, really give you my undivided attention, talking, reading a book, eating a meal together. Right. There's so many forms that can come, but that connection piece is going to be vitally connected to the independent play piece. And if they haven't had that, it's going to be very difficult to then get them to kind of go and do their own thing. But the other thing I'd love to say while we're on that subject is this idea of like, have you heard of like the 9-minute rule?
No, well, I have when it when it comes to a different like I set my Alexa on a 10-minute and I like go clean what I can clean. But in terms of independent
Yes.
play, no.
Okay. So let's like reframe it for as it pertains to our relationship with our
Yeah.
kids. So the idea
Yeah.
is that like research shows that just 9 minutes of really focused and connected time in the day does like leaps and bounds wonders for really filling our kids' cup,
Wow.
making them feel seen, making them feel loved. And if you look at the study, what you'll see is that they kind of look at this as like 3 3-minute pockets in the day. So like when
Okay.
I do corporate speaking at big companies, this is something that comes up a lot because when you're a full-time working parent and you want to give that attention to your kid, but you also are like feeling so burnt out and overwhelmed between work, home responsibilities, all of that stuff, this is a
Mhm.
really great way. And if you work from home too, to kind of think about it. The idea is these 3 3-minute pockets. So like the first 3 minutes after your child wakes up, the first 3 minutes after you've been separated. So let's think like maybe daycare or school or something like that would fit into that, but you can kind of make it work, for however it pertains to you. And then the 3 minutes at bedtime. And the idea is that like those are points of transition, right? Points of
Okay.
separation, points of transition. But the truth
Yes.
is, it doesn't have to be those pockets. If we can just think to ourselves, I can find 3 minutes 3 times a day, or I can find one 9-minute pocket in the day to give my
Mhm.
child my undivided attention. So this means no phone, no computer, no, and this is the one I think I'm most guilty of personally, like octopus mom, like where
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm talking to you and I'm giving you attention, but I'm doing 12 other things, right? Like,
Right. You're cleaning the dishes and you're
exactly.
throwing in food somewhere or
Right.
whatever it is.
I'm moving the laundry, I'm packing whatever, like not that. Like I'm really here with you. Now that can be playing, that could be we go for a walk, that could be we're just sitting, that could be during your bath. Like you can figure out what works for you and you can figure out if it works better for you to sort of split that or to do one chunk. Different days can look different ways, right? But I
Right.
think as parents, especially those that work from home, it can feel really empowering to know, like, hey, I can find that. Even on the craziest days, I can find that. And if we know that finding that makes such a difference in filling that cup, that also then helps us feel better about those times that we're having them play on their own, right? That plus
Mhm.
the reframe of, hey, we're actually doing this for our kid, I
Yeah.
think can really help us feel like, hey, I'm doing my part to make my kid feel really seen, really loved, really cared for. And there's lots of science and research and psychology that backs up that that's true. And
Right.
that does actually so much more than longer periods of time where we're only partially in it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes so much sense. And I feel like too, like some listeners are gonna be like, oh, like you're only gonna spend 9 dedicated minutes with your kid a day. But when you look at it from a different perspective, it's not that you're only going to be spending those nine, super dedicated minutes towards your child a
Right.
day. It's that starting point. And like once you get
Yes.
on that starting point, it's very easy to implement it for longer and
Yes.
implement it more frequently. This also just plays into the fact that we're in an age of screens.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to just like put the TV on,
Yeah.
put be in front of our phones. It's almost invisible to us. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
clutter that we're looking at in our house for over a year.
Yes.
It
Yes.
becomes it's no longer
The
clutter, right?
piles.
It's just
The
like
piles.
yeah, the piles, like, are no longer existent to us, right? Because we've been looking at them for a year. It's kind of the same
Yeah.
time it's the same thing,
Yes.
like, with the screens. Implementing that 9-minute rule can kind of help to get you out of that, and it's so approachable, especially in this day and age where
Yeah.
especially moms are, like you said, octopus moms, right?
Yes.
We're juggling a
So much
million
on
things.
us all the time. And that's why I think like, and look, if you can do more, great, right? Like
Yeah.
if I think about it more on the days that we're feeling all of that mom guilt
Mhm.
about like what we're not giving, if we can kind of remind ourselves, I'm able to give that and that is still really great. I think
Yeah.
that can help us to, just to have some peace and kind of relinquish some of the guilt that we're just constantly feeling as parents, especially parents that work from home.
So then let's dive into independent play, but in a realistic, age appropriate way. Because of course, depending on how little your child is,
Yeah,
independent play is going to look different. So
totally.
when does independent play really start and become helpful towards development? And
Mm,
like what do those different types of independent play look like in terms of stages for those moms who are like, I don't even know where to start. Is this actually
mhm.
helping my kid while I'm on this Zoom call?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a great question. So the first thing I'll say is that you can start implementing independent play from the moment you're home from the hospital. Now, if you're listening
Wow.
to this and you're like, my kid's 9, crap, you can also start at any time.
Yeah.
And you're not like doomed if you didn't. But just to like show that it really can be something that you integrate right from the beginning.
Mhm.
And it's just going to continue to change shape. And the earlier we start building those skills, kind of the easier I think it becomes as your child grows. But again,
Mhm.
we can start implementing it at any time. So I don't want people to feel discouraged. But as you said, it's going to look different at different ages and stages. So when I talk about it with an infant, like, I was going to say, it would be great if my baby was actually doing this as we spoke, but she's asleep.
Yeah.
What it looks like in that stage is going to be like you set up your baby maybe on their play gym or on a blanket near to where you are. And again, this reframe really comes in the form of what is my role in the play as the
Mm.
adult. So with an infant,
Oh,
that would look like your baby kind of laying on their play gym, laying on a blanket, you nearby, and we're thinking about what our role is. So often in baby play, we're told that our role is we want them to track objects. So we're going to be holding it over their face and moving it side to side. That is
Mhm.
one way that we can engage with our infant. Another would be that we set them up and, like kind of we're describing with prompts or things of that nature. Then I step back and I observe what they're doing, but I'm not actively involved in making that happen. I'm not doing the shaking. I'm not, ringing the bell. In that moment of independent play with your infant, that looks like them just interacting, moving freely,
Yeah.
and, maybe there's one open ended toy if they're at an age that they can bat at things overhead, or maybe just look at it if they're at that age, depending on the age and stage.
Mhm.
But that's sort of what independent play looks like. So I'm nearby, right? We're not leaving our kid totally
Right, stranded.
unsupervised and left to their own devices. But
Yeah.
maybe from a work perspective, I have my baby set up in my home office right next to me
Yeah.
on the floor, and I'm sending my emails and kind of checking in, looking back, smile, like I'm there, I'm present, but
Yeah.
I'm not actually doing something to make that exploration happen, right?
Okay. Yeah, that makes
Is how we
sense.
want to look at that. As our baby starts becoming mobile, right? And this is with each stage of mobility come new discoveries, exploration, and
Challenges.
also kind of complication and challenge, right? This is where I often will recommend to parents, okay, well, how can we, from an independent play perspective,
Mhm.
have them safely able to move with the least amount of adult intervention possible? So
Okay.
that might look like we have a small area gated for them, right?
Okay.
This doesn't have to be a huge space, but a space where I have some toys out in that space. Again, not
Mhm.
too many. That's a different conversation, but we don't want to overstimulate, especially with our little ones.
Okay.
But they
Yep.
can move around and crawl freely, and I don't have to be, ooh, huh, right? Whatever is in there, I can feel comfortable that they can interact with it in a safe way. Again, I'm not like disappearing into the abyss and leaving them for hours on end,
Right.
but
You're not
they can
closing your door and
engage.
locking it while you're on a call and, like, just hoping
Exactly.
that the baby gate keeps them situated.
Exactly. But can I be there and doing stuff and they're kind of doing their thing while I'm able to just check in and do that safely? Yes. And again, the key is I'm not constantly intervening in their exploration. Now, separately from like a getting work done perspective, when we think about it from what's going to be developmentally supportive for our kids,
Mhm.
we want them to be able to interact and explore again safely, right? Because our job
Right.
as parents is to keep them healthy and safe,
Yeah.
without us constantly having to be like, "Oh, no, stop," right? Like that also is then each time interrupting their process, whether they're an
Mhm.
infant, whether they're a toddler. So we also want to be thinking about, well, how can we let them explore as much as possible with the least amount of intervention from us, because it also benefits them in that way,
Okay.
right? If as long
Yeah.
as it's safe. Because we can often, even with the best intentions, be kind of interrupting their flow of their play when we're
Yeah.
constantly doing that, right? So
Okay.
that's what that might look like.
Yeah.
When we have our toddler, this is where toddlers have very flitting and fleeting attention spans, right? And that's
Yes.
developmentally appropriate, right? You know firsthand. So we want to honor that and the fact that they're maybe not going to be staying with one thing for as long a period of time. And that's okay. And that's what we should see, but that can be difficult as a parent if they're constantly coming out of their play. But I would tell parents like that actually is exactly what we expect. So at that point,
Okay.
we want to have more options available in terms of things that they can do safely on their own without it being so much that they don't know where to look first, right? So it's about
Mhm.
striking a balance with that.
Yeah.
But this is also a place where prompts, I think, can be really, really helpful starting in toddlerhood and beyond, because that is a way that we can sort of set the stage to kind of get their mind going, get their creativity going, and then we can kind of take a step back. So again, this is a place we want to kind of think about, are we nearby? Are we within earshot and eye shot of, or eye line rather, of them so that they can feel safe and comfortable? And again, thinking about that creativity of then where we're setting up their play or where we're setting up our work. And when I say work, guys, this can also be like household things we have to get done. Like I've been known to tell parents I work with, like, hey, is there a place that your child can safely be playing in your laundry room while you're
Mhm.
folding, right? Like we
Yeah.
really want to get creative about where play happens. That's like a key piece here. Um, and then also thinking about what are we setting out for them and how is that kind of supportive of the phase and stage that they're in. So this often means, guys, like putting on your observation hat and being that like active observer watching your child. What are they interested in right now, right? Like, what are the things that kind of light them up? What are their preferences? This is where our prompts are going to be the most effective because, like us, kids are going to stick with things for longer when it follows their current interests, right? If I'm into something, I'm going to stick with it. If it's like stuff I found on the internet, very well intentioned, but has nothing to do with my play style, probably not
Yeah.
going to really look at it. And this is where like parents have like a lot of play fails, right? And they like feel discouraged because they're like, This thing that had millions of likes and I set it up and I took the time and my kid didn't even look at it," right? Like, have you been there? Like, I've definitely been there.
Yeah.
Um, right? So this is like a place where that can be really helpful and effective, but only if we're really paying attention to that stuff. I have a membership where I share simple play prompts every month. And I also have classes on kind of how you learn to observe your child, but in a way that's not
Okay.
clinical, but just like actually feels
Yeah.
doable. And a big part of that, guys, is just going to be like when they're engaged with something for more than a couple of minutes, right? That we just kind of notice what that is. So that could mean a toy. So, like maybe, hey, my kid's super into building right now, right? Or my kid is super into Paw Patrol right now, right? It could be a character, something like that. My kid is super into art and creating dramatic play, right? So it could be like a play style, but it could
Mm-hmm.
also be like, especially if you have a toddler, is very schema driven, meaning it's like process driven and that often looks like dumping. That often looks like knocking things down, which like I just feel like it feels very destructive and purposeless, but it actually can be very helpful for us as parents because it's like, ooh, they're in a knocking down phase. I'm not going to let them knock every book off the bookshelf, but what can I set up that's going to allow for that developmental need in a safe way? And it's going to
Okay.
keep them engaged and busy because that's what they're into right now, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
about not fighting it, but following it and sort
Yeah.
of like giving into this developmental need. But a prompt is like when we put two things out together that maybe our child isn't used to seeing. And that sparks their play, that follows their current interests, and that sparks their play. In my membership, I give ideas for like, how can we use the toys that we have in like a unique way that maybe they haven't seen before to spark
Okay.
their play. And we're going to set that out near to where we are. It's going to follow their current interest or, things that they're engaging with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to kind of get them started. Many children can engage in independent play if we're near to them and if they have something engaging to explore, but they need a little support with kickstarting their play, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, it does. And it sounds like the setup of the physical space also makes a big difference because a little earlier you noted you don't want to overstimulate them with
That's
too
right.
many toys,
That's
which
right.
I mean, it is so easy as a parent because you're
Yes,
just
of
constantly
course.
being gifted toys and like
Of
as much
course.
as you try to keep some of them.
And you see stuff on the
Yeah.
internet that this is like the must have thing that you need. And then like you get it and
Yeah.
then it doesn't really hold your kid's attention. So you try another and you try another and it just builds and builds and builds. I'm really glad you brought up the environment
Yep.
because that's going to be a key piece, certainly in terms of how much we have out and finding that balance,
Okay.
but also like what kind of
Mhm.
toys do we have available? If we want to encourage independent play and longer stretches of engaged play, we want to think about, does it follow our kids' interests, right? That's a key piece. Their interest in this moment. It's constantly going to be evolving, right? If we have a kid
Right,
that's
right.
really into building right now, do I have lots of materials for them to build with, right?
Mhm.
It seems like an obvious thing, but like often we don't. We have like a lot of different things available, but maybe they're not things that currently are following where our kid is at right now.
Mhm.
So that's something we really want to be paying attention to. We also want to be thinking about, are these things open ended in nature? Do they offer like a lot of different possibilities for play or are they like a one and done? If you have
Okay.
like, I
Yeah.
always use this example of like the light up piano. Right. Because I feel like that's like a really accessible one. If we have this like light up piano and our kid pushes the button and the thing lights up and plays a song, and then they push a button and it lights up and plays a song, that's
Mhm.
only going to be fun for so long before it's like, well, I did everything that this does, on to the next.
Okay, yeah.
Versus something like, I don't know, magnetic tiles is like a favorite of mine for like
Those are
toddler
so
through middle school, right? Like it's just like they continue to grow with your kid through different age. So that's something that's like there's so many different ways to play with that and it can keep meeting them as as they grow and their skills change, right? So what it looks like at 2, it looks different at 2.5, 3, 4, 5. But at 12, 13, our kids can still be playing with these things, right? But now we're
Yeah.
just doing complex builds and we're adding in maybe ramps and marble runs and like different types of stuff. So
Yeah.
we want to think about like how many different ways can my kid play with this? If the answer is one, these are not the things we want to invest in repeatedly. But things like blocks, balls, figurines, there's so many different ways that that can be used and utilized, right? So that's
Mm,
a key piece in the environment. Do these things offer multiple possibilities? Can they play in partnership with other toys that are here? This is how we
yeah.
start to see like longer play stretches happening because maybe a prompt is one thing we can do, right? But maybe another thing is like our kid is playing with their blocks and then they look over and they also see their figurines and now we can bring our figurines over. And then they see their
Mhm.
cars and they can bring their cars over. And then they see,
Yeah.
right? So we see how these things then can like build upon each other and stretch the play.
Mhm.
Another environmental thing we want to think about is can they see the toys that are available to them, right?
Yeah.
This is like, and it's so tricky because it's can feel like an eyesore
Yeah, you don't
to
wanna
have
have just, like, clutter
just like
everywhere.
stuff everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And then that can also add to the overwhelm. So, like, how do we find the balance? So, I get that. But I think if we think about is it at child height? Is it stored in a way that we can see what's in the bins? Or is it really neatly tucked away in a closet up on a shelf and my
Okay.
kid can't see it? Or they
Yeah.
need me to get it down and now I'm involved, right? So, we want to think about that when we're thinking about how we set up play spaces. A lot of the ways that I work with families is with like play space revamps
Okay.
and like where I consult about this, where you show me your space and we kind of figure out for your space what looks best, not in like a Montessori, like perfect shelfie, situation, but like what's actually functional for your space. And that
Yeah.
often, little tweaks can make the world of difference in that. But I think we often see like toy chests or like, shelving systems in the closet for storage that don't actually help the goal of independent play because
Right.
they can't see the stuff, they can't reach the stuff on their own. That really, really can make a difference in terms of the amount of independent play that you're seeing at home and how long those stretches go.
Yeah, we just finished construction at our house, and now we have this little alcove that I'm planning on making,
Mm.
like, that is the play corner. Like, it's open
Mm-hmm.
layout with our family room, but, like, that is where the toys will live, and I was
Yes.
the other day, I'm, like, looking at shelving, I'm kind of trying to figure out how we wanna go about it. You know, the cube
Yeah.
shelves are always popular, but I
Yes.
saw those IKEA shelves that, you can customize with the drawers
Yes.
that go
Yep.
in and out, and I was like,
Yep.
"Oh, that's really cool," because he could probably pull that shelf or the drawer in
Yes.
and out.
Yes.
They're not see-through, so it's not gonna be a clutter issue. I feel like they're more interactive almost
Yes.
than the cube. I feel like the
Totally.
cube can become cluttered very
Mhm.
quickly.
Yes, and a lot of that also is like how are things then displayed in the cube, right?
Mhm.
How are they stored in the cube? Is it totally open with things there? How things with lots of little pieces, how is that stored? Like all that stuff kind of weighs
The
into
little
it.
piece.
Those pouches where we can see what's in it, they're all together and then those are stored in a bin or in a basket. Like these are all things that it takes time initially to get it set up, but once you have the systems in place, they
Mhm.
like work for themselves. And I love like what you were saying about the drawers that are at a height he can pull out and reach because that again it eliminates you but it's also eliminating some of the outward clutter if he can do that safely on his own. And it also, guys, helps with cleanup and independence there, right? Like, we
Yeah.
want to be able to get our kids to a point that they can put things back with less and less assistance from us. And it's
Mhm.
really helpful if they can see where things go, right? And from a young age, right? Usually from like early toddlerhood, we're able to start sorting and it actually feels like a game, which is helpful. So if they can see, like, oh, all my cars and trucks are here, I can put that back as opposed to we have them in a place up higher where they can't get to them and then it relies on us to do it. That also really helps with independence in that area as well.
Right, and like you said, like, there's so many toys that can be used more than once and in so many different directions. I mean, for us, and I know there's, like, a love-hate with this, but the Pickler
Yeah.
triangle set has been
Yes.
a huge success for
Yes.
us. I mean, he didn't
That's
really start
great.
to use it until, I don't know, maybe like 2 months ago, partially because we had construction going on, so it wasn't
Yeah.
out, but also because,
Yeah.
he's running and now wanting to climb on every single thing in sight and actually being successful at it. So,
Yes.
but it's like, it's
Yeah.
great because he can climb on it, he can slide down it, you can flip it over, and he can climb between the 2
Yes.
sections. But what he started to do, which I think is a great example here, is he takes his cars and he'll have them go down the slide. And it's like a whole other
Yes,
game
I
to
love
him.
that.
Yeah, and it's not something
Yes.
I thought of, he just, like,
Yeah.
started to do it, and I was like,
Yes.
"Oh, that is a toy that is actually probably gonna be with us for a while," because it's like, there's so many things that he could be doing on it.
Totally. And I think, look, some of that, again, comes from if your space allows your child to be able to go from their climber over to their bit of cars to make those connections and get creative
Mhm,
like that, right? It kind of does that functioning for you, which really helps. But again, the open endedness of something like that
mhm.
is, there are so many possibilities and often ones that our kids see and we don't. So when we give them the space to kind of figure those things out, they
Yeah.
can find these really engaging ways of, entertaining themselves and of exploring. And I think, look, guys, some kids are at doing that than others. And that's where the prompts I think are really helpful because sometimes we just need that little something, which if, in my membership, I'm just thinking like I actually had a thing with like ramps and cars. And it was as
Mhm.
simple as it could be like the slide from the pickler triangle. It could be a lid of an underbed storage
Yeah.
container on an incline. But if you just have that out with a basket of cars, you don't have to show your kid how to do it. You don't have to like model it. They
Yeah.
will start to figure that out. And you're just doing the like setting out of getting them started for them. And I think that if you have a child who does struggle to get started, it's a great way of thinking about it. Just putting out two things and seeing what they do. There's no right or wrong. I think we also, as parents, I know we kind of touched on this before, with really good intentions, we kind of get in the mix of like showing them the way to do things. And
Mhm.
then that often limits the possibilities that they see. Whereas you're saying, like, he came up with that completely on his own. Like, you wouldn't have thought of that. But if we had maybe entered into the room and start to say, oh, no, no, that's not what we did with the slide, right? No,
Yeah.
we slide down the slide, which so many of us, well meaning, do that. And now we've
Mhm.
kind of cut off this whole thing that maybe would have been kept him engaged for like 20, 30 minutes.
Right. It makes it so hard, and I feel like part of it too is as adults, like, our brains are so much more complex that we often overlook these
Of
very
course.
simple,
Yes.
like, creative play. In our minds, we're like, "We have to set up a sandbox and put the dump truck in
Yes.
it and make it
Yes.
this and make
Yes.
it that," and, like,
Yes.
really, it's so simple that
Totally.
yeah.
If it like brings you joy, right? Like I'm a former classroom teacher and I loved setting that kind of stuff up in my classroom. That's part of how I started my business of like, how can we take those classroom experiences and help people set them up at
Mhm.
home?
Mhm.
Was sort of where I started, but I'm going to be very transparent with you. The me who was doing that stuff without kids of my own,
Mhm.
like, had like a little bit of a shift and a wake up call when
Yeah.
I was doing that stuff with my toddler and feeling very overwhelmed in a way I never felt as a classroom teacher doing it with 15 kids, because there's something about doing it in your own space. You're responsible for the setup, you're responsible for the cleanup, and you're then, having to navigate the next transition into the next thing. It's very overwhelming, even for someone who, like me, who loves that kind of stuff and loves messy play. And
Mhm.
when I started doing it as a parent, it felt there was a shift where I was like, oh, no, no. Like things that I thought were simple before are not simple enough for me now. And it kind of like going back to basics like that and sort of, zooming out and realizing like, hey, my daughter's really happy playing with a mixing bowl because the mixing bowl is reflective and it's really cool seeing what happens when you drop things inside and it makes different sounds and like really cool when I overturn it and she puts it on her head, or when she drives her vehicle over it like it's a mountain. And you see where I'm going with this, but it was kind
Yeah.
of like, hey, it doesn't require this level that I'm putting into it. So on the days where I feel called to that and that feels fun for me, great. But that doesn't have to be your everyday. It doesn't have to be your ever if it stresses you out. And I feel like if people are listening and feeling that guilt too, because especially now in this like age of social media and Pinterest, we see all this stuff that we're not doing. And we often feel like, oh, like, am I, a less than mom because I'm not
Yeah.
doing that?
It's hard.
It is, and I feel like if it calls to you and it brings you joy to do it, then by all means do it. But if it like makes you feel stressed, if you feel like you can't feel at ease, if you can't find joy in that, then
Mhm.
don't. There are so many ways to connect with our kids. There are so many ways to play with our kids and to be playful with our kids. Like, don't put the pressure on yourself to do that thing that everyone else is doing because, it's fun for them. Or the other thing is find a way to do it then that's less stressful. So to give an example to people, messy play is important. Like there's no way around it. Like it is an important part of childhood. But there are ways that we can do that at home that are less stressful for us. And one of my favorites is like do it in the bathtub. Do it in the
Yeah.
bathtub. Like paint in the bathtub. Like that's like hands down one of the best sensory experiences that we can give our kids where and if you want to like even pro tip, reduce some more of the cleanup stress for you.
Yeah.
Add a little dish soap into the washable paints and then let them just have at it. When you turn on the water, it will wipe away so easy. They're already where they need to be to get cleaned up. Like you don't have to be like, what are you touching? Like, don't touch the wall, don't touch this, which is
Right.
completely understandable, right? Because like that is stressful. No, but like that's a perfect example. Like take it to the tub, like take it outside when you can. Set up a bunch of towels like a big pile of them and a big bowl of water, like on standby, ready to go right next to you. So we're not even like walking to the sink. We just boop right in. Like if you aren't doing it in the tub, like these are steps that we can take to kind of let ourselves ease into it too, to kind of follow that developmental need in childhood without it then feeling like completely overwhelming and burning us out.
What is one toy out of all the toys that you've had with your 2 kids so far that you think encourages the longest independent play?
Magnetic tiles and Play-Doh as a close second. And water. If we're talking about like not a toy, but just like a thing that's around, I could put out a bowl of water for my 5-year-old and a bowl or tray of water for my 2-month-old, and they will both be engaged for a very long time.
Awesome. What do you think is one mistake parents make with independent play?
I think thinking that it has to happen in a room separately from you, and that it doesn't count as independent play if you're nearby.
What is one phrase that parents can use when it comes to independent play with their children that sets the expectations immediately, but also kindly?
Um, I'm going to do my work and you're going to do your work.
On their work is play.
Their work is play. Yeah,
So
and it really
sweet.
is. Like it really is. And I think that like um saying it like that and
Mhm.
also then helps them understand like hey, what you're doing is also really important. I value
Right.
what you're doing, right? So I think that that's an important piece also. And the other
Mhm.
thing I would say, with not exactly a phrase, but creating the expectation around how long this is going to be happening and what's going to happen next, right? So
Yeah.
preparation is key for every transition in childhood, right? Like every single thing will go so much better with preparation. So I think if we can tell our children, I'm going to do this and you're going to do this. And after you're done, we're going to do this. And if we can set a visual timer so they can see the amount of time, if that's
Yeah.
applicable in this particular circumstance, sometimes it's not. But if we can, that can also be helpful too.
I feel like that's really helpful for children who might be a little bit needier, whether it's like full on, they always need a little bit more attention, or if there's like a stage going on, setting that expectation so that they know when mom or
Yeah.
when dad is going to be able to come back and give them full attention. Would you say that that's a good first step for those parents who maybe didn't promote independent play from the start and now they have older children who they want to start to promote that?
Yeah, I think that starting with a small block of time is
Hmm.
always going to set everybody up for success. And it really helps them build confidence. And honestly, it helps you build confidence too that
Hmm.
you can do this, that your child could do this. So maybe it's just a couple of minutes at first, depending on your child's age, right? We want to think
Right.
about what's an age appropriate attention span and all that stuff. But and I recommend it all the time. The only thing about it is that if your kid just like is really into you put out a prompt and they are really into it and timer goes off and it's like they would have played longer. That's the only
Um, final rapid fire question, but
Yeah.
what is one myth about independent play that you would like to bust?
Gosh, there's so much. Honestly, I feel like I've now said this several times, but I think it's just so important that it happens separately from you. I think that is like the biggest misconception that people have, especially with young kids, about what independent play looks like. I think we have to reframe it can look like that, but it often doesn't. And I would say 9 times out of 10, it does not look like that. So we're almost setting ourselves up for failure and our kids up for failure if we think that they should be able to just go off in a separate space and just automatically do this.
Okay.
We have to think about it, guys, more as are they engaging independently of my participation? Right. So I think that reframes the location. And I also think it helps us reframe, and this could be a whole other podcast episode, what play is, right?
Yeah.
Like what play looks like, especially if you're listening to this and you have a baby or a toddler at home. It does not look the way that we imagine all the time. It does not always look like our kids sitting quietly stacking blocks or
Mhm.
quietly feeding their baby doll. We talked about some of that toddler play almost feeling destructive in nature. That is developmentally appropriate. And
Mhm.
it often is more exploration driven, problem
Mhm.
solving driven. They're often taking materials and not utilizing them in the way we expect. But
Mhm.
if they're engaging, if it's holding their attention and they're exploring and engaging, and as long as they're being safe, to me, it counts. So if that means that what your child is doing right now is just dumping every basket and bin off of your toy shelf and then walking over it, like that to me counts. It really does. If that's keeping them engaged and busy and they are getting something out of that, it is not purposeless. So I think that reframe of location and what play is often key to seeing more independent play at home. You might hear this and be like, "Hey, I guess my kid is kind of playing by themselves. I just didn't think that was play." You know? But honestly, I think, and look, a lot of the time, truth be told, like I am doing, I try with calls and stuff, to think about childcare and that in the equation.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the time, that is how I'm working.
Yeah.
And that's just
Same.
like, and I'm sure you too. So like
Yeah.
it is, I think it can be helpful for people to see in practice kind of what that is. And look, let's just like, just so people know, I do this for work. My child has, and now children, they have great independent play skills, and I would hope that that they would. But I have had many a call where my daughter is constantly in and out of what she's doing, and like I have to kind of like I start to feel like, oh gosh, what do people think? Here I am talking about independent play and look at, but I think it's important that people see that is reality and it
Mhm.
doesn't not count. Coming in and out of play is normal, right? We can't have this expectation that our kids are just for an hour going to be off to themselves. Sometimes, yes, sometimes there are days that look like that. More often than not, she's, hey, mommy, look what I did. Oh, wow, so cool. And then she's back in it, right? And
Mhm.
that is realistically often what that looks like. It doesn't mean that what you're doing doesn't count. It doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't benefiting them. There is
Mhm.
that kind of ebb and flow to it. And then sometimes we do get those really long stretches where we're like, should we be worried? Is something happening? They're really quiet. And they are just that engaged. But more often than not, it does look like that. So you're not failing if that's kind of the rhythm that you find yourself in. And then these other things that we're talking about can sort of next level, right? The play that you're seeing happening.
Right. Well, you've been so helpful, at least for
Yay,
my
I'm so
mom
glad.
brain. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am feeling way less guilty about having John do independent play, and he's not even here independent playing. There's so much, so many important points that not only just like every mom I think will benefit from, but any parent who's working from home because it's so easy to just get wrapped up in the cycle and you truly like feel bad that you aren't 100% with your child 24/7 a day. Um and it's not realistic in today's day and age.
I'm so glad. I think that's the key, right? Like quality over quantity, and think that reframe of like, this is actually a gift. It's not something we're doing to our kid. We're doing it
Mhm.
for our kid, right? And like that we really, I think if we can look at it like that and like how beneficial this is for them and for their development, it
Yeah.
really helps kind of dissuade some of that. We're always going to have some because that's mom life is just grappling with some guilt, it feels, but I think it really helps.
So then, Jill, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, so you guys can find me at www.jillybeansnyc.com. That's where you can learn more about the way I work with families. You can learn more about my low-cost monthly membership that we were talking about, where I share simple ideas that use the toys and household items you have in unique ways to help spark more play, as well as like consultations. And you can also find my podcast there, The Art of Playful Parenting, where I share more tips
Yeah.
like this.
Did see that.
Yeah, and or on social, at Jillybeans NYC on Instagram, where I share lots of simple play ideas, play tips, mom life. Because, like I said, this speaks to me because I'm right there in it with you as a mom running a business who's also the primary caretaker, and I share a lot about kind of what that juggle looks like for me there too.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for coming on. This has been so helpful. I know our listeners are going to absolutely enjoy this episode. For those who are listening, thank you so much for tuning in, and keep an eye out for another episode next Wednesday. And if you liked this episode, feel free to rate it and comment. That's how it supports creators. And definitely check out Jill on social media or on her website, like she said, so you can learn all of those play prompts and learn more about the topics of independent play. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode of the Working Moms Playbook. And also, thank you so much for sharing this episode with any and every working mom who might benefit. Also, thank you for subscribing. It means so much to be able to continue to grow this village of working moms in a world where our villages can feel fairly small. Keep an eye out for next week's episode, always debuting on a Wednesday, and I can't wait to see you there.